If you want to get started building products or services that use AI, then this video is for you. Today, I want to share with you how to build a ChatGPT client in Python that we can run directly from the terminal. In doing so, you will learn how to use the ChatGPT API directly from Python and how to modify your prompts so that you can add additional functionality or personality to your app. With the release of ChatGPT's new API, the business use cases of generative AI is booming right now. Just check out the Google search volume for any AI-related topic. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities to create things that weren't possible up until now. So if you're excited about AI and want to learn how to use it, then let's get started. Before we get started coding, let's take a look at some of the benefits of using an OpenAI API. First of all, the tech is extremely powerful, but it's also really cheap to use. There's also many ways to use it. And I think that these three things create the perfect storm for innovation and creativity when it comes to using generative AI, both for business and for just fun projects in general. In this tutorial specifically, we're going to learn how to use the GPT 3.5 Turbo model. This model was released recently, and it is the same model that ChatGPT uses behind the scenes. But I think the best thing about it is that it's also extremely cheap. It only costs $0.002 per 1,000 tokens. And you can think of tokens like words. So you can almost process an entire essay, and it won't even cost you 10 cents to do that. And aside from being extremely cheap, I think that the API is also extremely accessible because anybody can go ahead and sign up to use it right now. And there's no more waiting or a screening process that you need to do. You could sign up right now at the website to get an API key and start using it. Overall, I think that this is going to be a great thing to learn whether you want to build your own original AI products or pick up a new skill for your resume. And this entire project is going to take you less than half an hour to code. To follow along with this project, you're going to need to know the basics of Python and a little bit about how REST API works. We'll also be using the OpenAI Python library, so you'll need to know how to use a package manager like pip as well. And this is the command you need to run with pip to install the OpenAI library in Python. Now let's go over what we will be building in this tutorial. Our project is going to be contained within a single Python file. We'll be able to run this script directly from the terminal, especially if we create an alias for it, and then we can use it to ask GPT questions directly from our terminal. For example, I could ask it, what are 5 books to get better at coding? And the program will talk to GPT directly from the terminal and then give us the response here. And it will maintain this chat context, so we can ask it follow-up questions as well, like, where can I buy them? And here it'll answer with where it thinks we can buy these books. So here it says you can buy these books online from various retailers such as Amazon, etc., etc. And to end the conversation, we just press enter without typing anything in the prompt. I'll also show you how to modify the program so that you can get the AI to respond to you with a specific personality. In this case, I prompted it to respond sarcastically and berate the user, but still answer them anyway. And if I ask the AI the same question, you could see that it's added these sassy remarks to the prompt, but it still answers me anyways. To do all of this stuff, you're going to need an API key from OpenAI. So head over to platform.openai.com and sign up for an account. Once you've signed up, go over to your profile and then click View API Keys. And then click Create New Secret Key. I already have the maximum number of API keys, so I can't create any more, but here you should see a pop-up with a big piece of text. So copy that because that's the only time you're ever going to see it. And that key is what you will eventually need for your Python app to be able to talk to OpenAI and use this ChatGPT endpoint. Now, before I start using an API, I usually like to have the documentation open, so I recommend you do that as well. And to do that, just click here on the documentation, and then scroll down and look for chat completion, which is the one we'll be using. And here you'll see a bunch of text explaining what it's about, an introduction, and a couple of code examples. And this is pretty straightforward. So once we're in Python, we can basically just import the OpenAI client, specify the model, which is going to be this ChatGPT Turbo, and then we can send it a series of messages. And the messages are JSON formatted, and they have a role and a content. And there's 3 different roles we can include in our messages. So here we could use the system role to tell the AI what type of personality it should have or how it should respond to the user messages. And if we want to give the AI examples of how to react, we can also include a couple of sample user and assistant responses. These won't be used in the prompt, but it will help the AI understand how it is expected to respond to user messages. We can also use this to establish context for a conversation. So if we have a conversation with 10 exchanges between the user and the AI already, we can basically put that whole list into this message so that the AI knows how to answer follow-up questions of the user. Finally, the prompt that the AI will pay attention to the most is this last user content prompt here. And that is essentially what the AI will respond to. And if we scroll down, you can see the expected response format. So we're going to get a message object with the role of assistant and the content of the AI. So this text is what we're really looking for here in our response. The response will also include usage information about this particular request. So it'll tell us how many tokens we used to generate this output. And this is important to you because the tokens is how the pricing is calculated when you use OpenAI. And if you go to your user profile and then you click pricing, you'll be able to see the pricing page for each of the models. So you can see here the chat model will charge you $0.002 for every 1,000 tokens. To put into perspective how cheap this is, if you get this ChatGPT to write you an entire 10,000 word essay, it's only going to cost you 2 cents. I think we've now spent enough time reading the documentation. Now let's get to coding. I'm in my editor, VS Code, and I'm in a new project directory called GPT Shell, and it's completely empty. So let's first start by creating our Python file. And I'm going to call this gpt.py. And you can call this whatever you want. Here, I'm going to create the main function that I'm going to use to run the program, and then run it when this file is executed. And this is how I like to start my projects. So just an empty function called main, and I'm just going to pass. And then I'm going to write this if name equals main, run main. So this will get the program to run when I execute it. Because ultimately, I want to run this as a script in my terminal. And let's go to this terminal and see if we can run the file. So I'm just going to type Python, and then gpt.py. And so it runs, no errors, but nothing shows up yet. Okay, that's fine. So now let's just print a hello world message. And if I go back and run that again, the message shows up. So that's good. And now let's import the OpenAI library because that's critical to what we want to build. And if you don't have this, then don't forget to run pip install OpenAI in your environment. And you might need to upgrade it if you don't have the latest version because the GPT client is only in the latest version. I believe that's going to be version 0.27 and up. If you've installed OpenAI with pip and it's still complaining in your VS Code, then just click at the bottom here and it will show all the Python environments on your computer. So just make sure that you're using the right one that you've installed OpenAI into. Now I want my program to be able to take a list of arguments from the terminal. So if I open my program in the terminal, I want to be able to type GPT and then send a message like hello world, like this. And this doesn't do anything because we don't recognize this input yet, but I wanted to recognize that input. I'm going to use the argparse library in Python, which lets us deal with arguments passed into the command line if we use it like this. So let's go ahead and import that as well. And argparse is a default library in Python, so you don't have to install anything. It should just come by default. To use argparse, we first have to create a parser, and then we can start adding arguments to it. So I want to add an argument called a prompt, which is going to be the user's input. And I want the prompt to be able to have multiple words. So I'm going to do nargs equals plus. I'm going to say the type is going to be a string. And this nargs plus will make it so that if we don't put quotes around our prompt, it's still able to understand that each one of those is part of that same prompt. So this is going to become a list. First, we'll have to parse the arguments, and then we access it by doing args.prompt here. But since prompt is going to be a list, we're going to have to join it on a space so that it turns it into one string. And then we can print out the entire prompt. And I can also print out the original prompt as received by the argument parser, just so you can see how it looks. Let's go back to the terminal and try it again. Run the same command. And you can see here, because I've put it into quotes, this is seen as one argument by our argparse command. So it comes as one element in the list. But now I can also do something like this. Python GPT, but then without the quotes. So if I do hello world, it will still understand that these are two separate arguments, but it turns them into one sentence for our AI. So now we have the prompt. Let's send it over to ChatGPT. And to do that, I'm going to create a separate function just so I can keep my code clean. And I'm going to create this function called askGPT. And it's going to accept the prompt as an input. First, we'll need to set up the OpenAI client with the API key that we've created earlier. So here, you could set it into your environment variable if you know how to do that. You could do it with the dot file if you know how to do that. Or you could just set it here directly as a string as well. So whatever your key is, just enter it here. But I've already set it as my environment variable, so this is what I'm going to use. If you do it like me, you're going to have to also import OS so that you can get this environment variable. And once the key is set up for our client, let's go back to the documentation and copy the code example that they showed us. So now I'm back on the OpenAI documentation for chat completion. We've already imported OpenAI and we've already set up our key. So let's just copy the actual code making this request. And I'm just going to paste it down here. Okay, so let's take a look at this. We use the SDK to create a chat completion, and we use the model GPT Turbo. And then the message is this list of things. But let's get rid of that. Let's just put in the message that we prompted from our terminal. So let's just put that here. So we have this. Well, how do we get a response? I think the documentation has an example for that as well. So if you scroll down, it says the Python assistant's reply can be extracted with response, choices, 0, message, content. So let's just copy that and put it into our app. First, we'll actually have to store the response in a variable. And now we can do that. I don't know. I don't think it's happy with these quotes when I copy pasted it. So you got to watch out for that. Sometimes when you paste stuff from websites, it's not using the right characters for certain things. So I'm just going to replace that with double quotes that my Python interpreter understands. And now I have the message. I guess I'll call that content. But this is going to be a string, and I can print this out or I can return it. I'm going to do both. I'm going to print it out and return it. So now my askGPT function is complete. Let's go ahead and use it here. Let's go back to our terminal and run the program again. So this time we have a response from ChatGPT. We said hello world to it, and it says, hello there, how can I assist you today? To make this a little bit nicer, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to change the response text from ChatGPT to a different color, maybe green, so it stands out. And I'm also going to reprint the question that we're asking it. And I'm going to delete this because I don't need it anymore. And I will make this a format string, and I'm going to put Q for a question. Now, to make ChatGPT's response appear in a different color, I can add special characters to it that my terminal understands, and it's going to render those text as a different color. So let's do that. And I'm using GitHub Copilot, so I don't even need to remember how to do this. I just have to type in a comment, and it will auto-suggest it for me. So this is how we can do it. And if I run it again, I can see that my question is now showing at the top, and the response is showing in this green color. I can also strip this white space so it doesn't have like a double space here. So to do that, I think that the response is usually returned with a couple of extra new lines. Because this is a string, I can actually call strip on it to get rid of the trailing white spaces before and after it. But I still might want at least one new line, so I'll just add that at the top here as well. Now let's try to ask it a more complex question. So here I'm going to say, how do I sort a list in Python? Okay, so this works. It gives me a really long response. It says, to sort a list in Python, you could use the sorted function or the sort method, and then it shows me code examples for each of those things. And now I have two problems with this. First is I can't ask it follow-up questions because when I finish typing, the program exits. So if I ask it something now, it doesn't have the context of this previous conversation. For example, I want to ask it, which method do you recommend? And here it doesn't really understand because it's lost this context. The second problem I have is that this response is a bit too long for me. I think that if it just provides a code snippet or maybe just a one-liner explaining how to do it, that's usually enough. So I want to tell it to just keep its responses shorter and more concise. So how can we modify our application to fix those two problems? Let's break it down one problem at a time. First, let's make it understand the context of the chat. So if you look here, the input to the API is actually a list of messages. All we would have to do is just store a certain number of messages from the user and send that entire list back to GPT. But we'll also need to make it so that when we ask GPT something, we don't terminate the program right away. We run in a loop and keep prompting them for input until they decide to exit. To do that, let's first create an empty list called chat history. And I'm also going to make this askGPT accept chat history as an argument. Now I'm going to assume that this chat history is going to be a list of objects like these. So it's not just going to be the string itself, because I also need the role and the content in this structure. So if it's a list of things like this, I should be able to just expand it or spread it directly in the messages using this asterisk symbol. And this will kind of unpack all of the items of chat history and just put it into this messages list instead. When we run this for the first time, chat history is going to be empty and this expansion will do nothing. So our first input is always going to look the same, like this. Now, as we use this application, we want to store all of the things we do into this chat history. Ideally, we probably want to put a limit on it as well, so that if we have more than 10 or maybe 100 pieces of conversation, we start evicting some of the previous elements, just so that we don't have an infinitely long chat history going on forever, because those still count towards our token use per interaction with the AI. But we're not going to do that for now. We're just going to put everything into chat history and assume that we don't use it more than a couple of times in one sitting. So to do that, let's first create this as a separate object. And I'm going to call this user prompt. And now I'm going to append that to my chat history. And I'm also going to put it into here. Well, actually, I want to append it after I send this response, because I don't want to actually have it appear in the chat history before I expand it and use it in the messages. I'll also need the AI's response to be added to the chat history. Okay, so now I should have a chat history being built up as I use this. So now I've updated my askGPT function to also take a chat history, and I'm updating the history as I go. The last part to this is to create a loop so that I keep prompting the user for input as long as they're still using the app. So to start with, I'm going to capture their input by using the inbuilt input function. And here we can put a string. This string can be anything you want. It's just going to show up prompting the user to enter some text. And we're going to store that text in the user input variable. And here I'm going to create a loop. So while the user input is not equal to an empty string, which means that if they just press enter without typing anything, the app will exit. But while that's not true, and while there is some text in the user input, I'm going to ask GPT with that as the new prompt. And I'm just going to keep repeating this input prompt until they decide to exit. And we're not doing anything with this response at the moment, so I don't even have to do this. I could just type askGPT because it will be printed out within the function itself. And if they do decide to exit the app and just press enter, I can make the application just say bye and that it's ending the session. So now let's hop over to the terminal and see if that works. So here, let's ask it the same question again. How do you sort a list in Python? So now it's responded with code examples and how I can sort a list in Python. Now I can ask it a follow-up question, and it will actually have this context. So I can ask, now how about JavaScript? And if I ask that, you could see that it still remembers what I asked it before about sorting a list, but now it's kind of transferred that context over to JavaScript and given me examples on how to sort things in JavaScript. Okay, so this works really well. And then if I press enter without having anything typed here, it will interpret that as me exiting the session. So it'll say bye to me. And the next thing I want to fix now is that these answers are really long. And in fact, I want more control of the style of the response that GPT will return to me. So let's go back to our code editor and use that system role prompt that we saw in the example snippet. Now I'm going to make the system message a part of the argument to my askGPT function. And I'm going to add that right at the top of my messages list. So the role is going to be system, and the content is going to be the system message string. And now I have to create a system message. So I could do that as a constant, or I could do it here. Let's do it as a constant up here. And for my system message, I'm going to tell it to answer with short, concise, really condensed information. So this is a system message I want to be included when I prompt GPT. Answer the user with short, concise answers and code snippets. Keep it to the point and don't go off topic. Okay, so now I have this constant and I just have to put it into my function. I'll put it in here and I'll also put it in here while I'm using it. So now it should receive the system message. It should add it to our list of messages. Let's see if that works. Back to our terminal. Let's clear this out and ask the exact same question again. Okay, so this is a lot shorter. It's not as verbose. There's a code snippet right away, and there's an explanation as well. And now let's try to ask it how to do it in JavaScript. And still, this is pretty short, so that's quite good. Now, you could also have a lot of fun with this. You can prompt the system message to basically do anything you want. Another really interesting use case I just thought of is you could use it to write real estate listings, for example. If you're a real estate agent or you're just wanting to rent out your room, we can tell it to do something like this. So now my system message is that you are a real estate listing assistant and to generate a listing description based on the user's prompt and descriptions, and use emotionally charged words to describe the property, emojis, and capitalization to emphasize the good qualities of the property. Let's see what it comes up with. So here I'm going to say 2-bed, 2-bath, 1 car, Northview River storage, 4th floor, near train. And maybe I'll put a suburb as well, Redfern, Sydney. Okay, let's go ahead and run that and see what it does. So this is pretty funny. It's got the emojis spot on, and it's also got the capitalization and the type of language real estate agents love to use. This magnificent 2-bed, 2-bath apartment with 1-car garage is a true gem, perched on the 4th floor with gorgeous views of the river and the city's north. The location offers a lifestyle of convenience and luxury. Yeah, and you can pause the video and read it yourself if you want, but yeah, I think this is a really interesting way to use the AI, just to kind of make somebody's workflow a little bit more automated and a little bit easier. So now that you have the script written in your folder somewhere, how do you actually make it so that you can run it from anywhere in your terminal? It depends on the type of terminal you're using, but most people are using Bash terminal or Z shell terminal if you're on a Unix system, which is Mac or Linux. But I'm actually using Fish because I'm just trying it out, so my terminal is a little bit different. But either way, it's pretty simple. We just need to know the location of the Python binary that we're using to run this so that we have all the environments. And we also need to know the location of the file that we're using. Now, a really easy way to check that is to just go here, and then you see the exact path to your Python binary in VS Code. And if you're in the terminal already, you should also be able to get the location of your Python executable by just typing which Python. So here it is. So now if I run this command with this file, let me just put this here like this, I should be able to execute this from anywhere. So even though this is a little bit longer than before, now it's actually universally executable. I also have to enter the prompt. So I'll be hello. Oh yeah, it's still the real estate bot. So I'll have to do 2-bed, 2-bath, 1 car. Okay, so if I want to make this accessible from anywhere, I can turn it into an alias. And if you're using Bash, you could just type in alias and then the name of the alias you want to call it. So for example, you could call it chat, and then you could type in quotes, the command that you want to run, including the full path. So in Bash, that should work, but I'm using Fish, so I don't think this actually works. Oh, maybe it does. I don't know. Well, okay, it does work in Fish as well. So yeah, just type this line, alias space, and then chat or whatever command you want, and equals to this. And that should work for you. And if you want this to be available every time you start your terminal, you have to modify your .rc file. Depending on what terminal you're using, it could be bashrc or zshellrc. So you could open that up and then just add that alias line to the bottom there. So now every time you start up your terminal, it should be available for you to use. On my own computer, I've actually aliased this to the GPT command. So that's why I can just type in GPT from anywhere in my terminal. Doesn't have to be in the same folder, and I can type in the prompt right away. And because this is actually referencing the file on disk, if I change or modify that file, like add a new system personality, it will automatically update when I use this command. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. And if you want to take a closer look at the code, then check the video description below for the GitHub link. If you have any questions or feedback, then please let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to see what else you could do with AI in Python, then check out this project where I generate an original Pokemon card collection using OpenAI and Midjourney. I hope you found this useful, and thank you for watching.